For this project, we're going to be working in a program called Gravit Designer, which is very similar to Adobe Illustrator. It just doesn't have as much capability or as many tools, but it still has a lot of the basics that we'll be using in the future and then for this project. Here's an example of a portrait that was created in Gravit Designer, and I just want to show you some of the basic tools here before we jump into the first practice image and then move into practicing portraits a little bit as well. It's set up similar to the Adobe program, so similar to Photoshop or Illustrator, where at the top here you have File, Edit, Modify, and just some of the basic edits and functions. So if you go to File, that's where you'll open new documents. That's where you'll save your images. You can import and place images from here as well. And then you'll export to save your files as JPEGs and the different file types there. And then edit at the top here is similar, where you can copy, paste, use some of those different settings to undo. And then modify is where there's going to be a few different settings to use with the pen tool. And then along the left here is where your layers are going to be found. So you're going to have all of the different layers that are created. Every time you create a shape, it's actually going to automatically create a new layer for you, which is nice. So it automatically separates everything. And then at the top is where some of the tools are found. So this is what would be along the left side in Illustrator or Photoshop. We're going to be mainly working with the pen tool, which is in Gravit Designer called the path tool. But there's also a little drop down arrow from there, and we're going to be using freehand as well sometimes. There's a text tool spot where you can place images. And then on the right side of the screen is where you're going to use the fill, border, opacity, and some of the more specific edits for each of the tools that you select. When you click on the link to open Gravit Designer, this is what's going to open up for you. When this comes up, you're going to hit Get Started. And I'm already logged in, but for you there should be a screen where you can create an account. Go ahead and just create an account using your Brunswick email, create a password, and then it should bring you to a screen that looks like this, where you can create a new design or open an image. I'm going to have you go ahead and open an image from your computer. So you should have downloaded the practice image that looks like this, but go ahead and find where you would have saved that, maybe under downloads, and go ahead and open that image. And we're going to just go ahead and jump right into working with the path tool or the pen tool here. So I'm going to click on the pen tool, and this is going to be used to outline a lot of the general shapes in your portraits so that you're able to have accurate outlines and fill those in with color and different details as we go. But we're going to start simple here and just create a straight line. So to use this path tool, you're going to click on the starting point of the line, and it's going to create what's called an anchor point. And then extending off of that anchor point is a little guideline here. So that guideline is telling me where the line will go as soon as I add another anchor point. So I'm going to click again to create that next anchor point to create the line there. And then you'll notice another line extends off of it. I'm going to hit Enter on my keyboard just to end that line so that I'm able to go ahead and move on to the next one. So this one we're going to do more of a zigzag line so you can get the idea of using those anchor points. But I'm just going to click and slide the mouse up so I'm not holding anything down on the keypad. I'm just clicking, letting go, and that is going to create a different direction every time I click and create an anchor point. I'm just going to click through here. Again, every time that I'm clicking, it's creating the anchor point, so I'm able to change direction. And then when I'm finished with that line, I'm going to hit Enter so I can move on. This next part's where it starts to get a little bit trickier with the pen tool, where you're creating curved lines. To create a curved line, instead of clicking and letting go on your keyboard, you're going to click and pull either up or down to create a curve. But to start, I'm going to start the same way. So I'm just going to click and let go to create my first anchor point. Now you'll notice that that line is straight still, just like what we were working with before. So I'm going to extend that line to the width that I want my shape to be, or the width I want that curve to be. And then I'm going to click again, and instead of letting go, I'm pulling down, and that's creating the curve and a handle. So you'll notice this extended line off of my anchor point, which is called a handle. And that's basically a guideline just telling me that I have the angle of my curve lined up. And you can kind of slide that around to get that angle right. So I'm going to try to line up that curve, let go, and then I'm going to hit enter. So that's creating that curved line there. I'm going to grab the path tool again, click on my next curved line, and I'm just clicking and letting go. And then I'm extending that line out to the side to create the width that I want this curve to be. And typically you'll want to create your next anchor point where your line starts to change direction. So this curve starts to come down and then slowly change direction as it comes up. So I'm going to click kind of in the middle there. And again, instead of letting go, I'm pulling down and angling that curved line off to the side. So now I have this part of the curve lined up. And now I want to continue and add the bottom part of the curve. And you'll notice that since I have this anchor point here with the handle extending off of it, that my line continues to curve because it still is connected to a handle here. So I'm going to just slide this over to the side, make sure that that curve lines up. Then I'm going to click and let go. And now I have a straight line extending off my anchor point because there is no handle attached to it. So I'm going to have to create a handle now to create the curve. So I'm going to extend that line off to the side where my line ends, and I'm pulling down to create that curve on my line here. So I'm creating that handle, lining it up to get that angle right, letting go, and then I'm going to hit enter to end my line. So we're going to do one more line here. This one is a combination of curved lines and straight lines. But again, to get started, I'm just going to click once and let go so that I have my anchor point and my line extending off of it. And then I'm creating my next anchor point where I want that curve to end. So I'm going to click here, and again, instead of letting go, I'm pulling down to create the handle, pulling it to the side a little bit to create that curve, letting go. And again, you'll notice since I still have that handle here, that the curve is going to continue, but I do not want that curve to continue. So I'm going to click back on the last anchor point, and that's creating a straight line extending off of it now, since I got rid of that second part of the handle. So I'm going to click where I want that straight line to end, and now I have a curved line to create. So I'm going to click back where I want the curved line or the width of that line to be, and instead of pulling down this time, I'm going to pull up with my handle to create that curve underneath. So I'm creating that curve, lining it up, clicking back on that last anchor point so that I have the straight line extended, clicking on my next spot here to end that straight line, clicking where that line starts to change direction, pulling down this time, and lining that up, clicking back on the anchor point so I have a straight line, and then ending my line here by clicking and pulling to the side to create the curve. So definitely play around with using that pen tool. I know it is tricky to get those curves just right, but it will come in handy when you get to your portraits to really have a good feel for how to create those curved lines. But go ahead and just try that first part. And when you're ready, go ahead to the second video that's on Classroom to watch how to put together this next part here.